Welcome to In the Hot Seat with the Tenney Group. I'm Spencer Tenney. It's good to be with you. Today, I'm very excited about our guest, President and Chief Operating Officer of the American Transportation Research Institute, the famous Rebecca Brewster. Rebecca, welcome to the Hot Seat.
Well, thank you, Spencer. I'm not sure about the famous, but it's certainly my pleasure to be with you today.
Well, I've seen you take some heat, but we're going to see how much heat you can take in the hot seat today. So I'm looking forward to mix this up. But before we do, would you just take maybe 20, 30 seconds for those that maybe not be familiar with your great organization? Just tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing over there at ATRI.
Absolutely. So, ATRI is the trucking industry's not for profit research organization. And we have one primary mission, and that's research to improve the industry's safety and productivity. And one of the hallmarks at ATRI is that in fulfillment of our mission, we provide all of our research free of charge. And so you and I are going to talk about one of our probably most popular annual studies, our top industry issues survey. But we have a whole large portfolio of studies available on our website, from predicting truck crash involvement to multiple studies on the topic of truck parking to looking at the hours of service rules, CSA, workforce issues. So I would encourage folks to visit our website if they haven't, and check it out for themselves. And it's real easy to find us on the internet because it's what we do. It's truckingresearch.org.
Well, what a URL! Hit the jackpot with that one,
We
and
did.
and I think we hit the jackpot with our guests. So let's jump right in. So let me set the stage here. I'm reading right off the report here. It says, given today's widespread economic challenges, it is imperative that supply chain stakeholders understand the interplay of the various issues confronting the trucking industry. I think that's what the issue is. It's like on any given day, what there's so many challenges. So how do we make sense of all of it? And so tell us about the history of the report. This is like, as you mentioned, there's a tremendous treasure chest of different resources within your organization. Why is this report so critical, and does it draw such a large audience and intrigue within the industry?
So we actually started this in 2005 at the request of then chairman of the American Trucking Associations, Fred Burns, who felt that the industry at that time was being too reactive to the issues that it was confronting. And he asked ATRI to develop a strategy to identify a little longer term what should the industry should be planning for. So we came up with this survey methodology, but what we found is people can really only focus on what's my pain right now. And so they responded to the survey with their most current pain points, and we ranked those pain points based on industry input. But I think, Spencer, the real value or the real compelling part of it is the industry also, through this survey and report, ranks strategies that they feel the industry should be pursuing. So those might be federal advocacy, state level advocacy, education and outreach, or in many cases, additional research that's needed. And that's where ATRI takes the findings of the survey and puts them to use with our research advisory committee. So we started in 2005, it became an annual survey. And really, because we've been doing it now for 18 years, it really has become a great indicator of sort of what's going on in the industry as we see various issues ebb and flow from the out into the top 10, out of the top 10. Some never leave the top 10. Some make a one-time appearance based on what's going on. But it really is a great timeline for looking at what's going on in the industry. And we get motor carriers from C-suite to technicians to dispatchers to sales folks. We get professional truck drivers, owner operators, and company drivers. We get law enforcement. We get government folks. Everyone who has a nexus to trucking is invited to take part in this survey. And this year we had over 4,200 survey responses.
Yeah, and to that point, I'm looking at some of the stats here, and it looks like the professional truck drivers make up the 47.2%. Motor carrier executives and personnel, 38.8%. 14% of those were industry stakeholders, and then another, I guess that included suppliers, driver trainers, and the law enforcement. Like so, a broad swath, different vantage points, and I think that's what makes it valuable.
It is. It really is this year we had more driver participants than we've had to date, which I'm very gratified by because I think drivers now realize this is a way to have their collective voice heard, and probably on no topic more so than on truck parking, because it has repeatedly ranked high on the driver list. We've now seen even activity at the federal level and a recognition with uh, Congress and the USDOT that there needs to be a concerted effort on building out more truck parking capacity.
100%. And I want to jump into the top 10, but before I do, I just want to make this comment, and I think this is really fascinating, kind of where our worlds collide, us being in the M&A advisory space, because we joke internally on any given day, given the problem that our friends in the industry face, they could either be a buyer or they could be a seller. It just it just really depends on what's going on.
Yeah.
And so I think that this report does a really good job of equipping business owners to navigate the best path for them, whatever that is moving forward. And so I really appreciate the information. So with that, would you share the top 10 for 2022 with us?
Absolutely. So, number one, no surprise to anybody who has been to the gas station lately, fuel prices, and more specifically for the trucking industry, diesel prices, the number one issue in the industry. And we had actually not seen fuel prices in the top 10 since 2013. So, it reemerged this year as the number one issue overall. Number two, driver shortage, which had been the number one issue for 5 years in a row. And as I tell people, it's not that the driver shortage got any better this year. It's just that fuel prices were so impactful for everyone, regardless of fleet size. But certainly at the mid and small fleet size and owner operators really feeling that pain at the pump. Number three, the issue I mentioned earlier, truck parking. And again, you think about how many drivers we had respond to the survey. Nearly 50% of the respondents were drivers. You understand why truck parking ranks so high. Number four, driver compensation. Rounding out the top five, the state of the nation's economy. And we hadn't seen that one on the top 10 list since 2020. So those were our top five. They're very interesting, but I also think that we'll call them the bottom five, but the next five are equally as interesting. So number six, detention, delay at customer facilities, a big issue for drivers, but also a big productivity issue for fleets as they look at the efficiency of their driver workforce. Number seven, driver retention. Number eight, compliance, safety, and accountability, or CSA as it's known, the regulatory agency's framework for how they evaluate carrier safety. Number nine, a new entrant to the top 10. We'd never seen it before in the top 10, speed limiters. And we know that earlier this year, FMCSA issued a notice of intent to enter into a speed limiter rulemaking next year in 2023. So lots of concern, particularly on the part of drivers, on what that will look like. And then rounding out the top 10, lawsuit abuse reform, which came on back into the top 10 list several years ago, as we've seen litigation against the trucking industry continue to take on frightening new levels.
Well, anybody from the outside looks at this list and like, what in the world? Why would you want to? Why would you want to be in this space? And and you and I know, because I know that you've been passionate and been dedicated to this industry for a good bit. It's kind of addicting. It's kind of addicting. Like when you get in this space and you get around the people and you realize you're making America go. It's a special thing to be a part of.
It is indeed, and I feel very privileged to have spent nearly 30 years on this job, and another four with a trucking fleet. So this
Mhm.
is trucking is my home, and it is great space.
Well, I love that. So I think what our audience will be particularly interested in. Okay, you got the top 10. What's the methodology? How did you arrive at this top 10? What's the process?
So we put the survey out there, and when you take the survey, it's fairly easy to take. You are presented with a list of this year where there were 29 issues that had been identified by industry stakeholders as important over time, or they've been ones that have been written into the survey in the past by enough people that we've elevated it to that main list. You're prompted to pick your top three. And we did have a lot of people write in and say, there's no way I can pick just three. All of these are critical to my business. But we force you to pick three. And then for each of those three, you're presented with some of those potential strategies that you think the industry should be pursuing. And you are asked to rank those 1 through 3. Now, what's so powerful about it is don't see your top 10 issue, one of your top 10 issues, write it in. Don't think we've selected good strategies, write it in. And those write-in comments this year were more colorful than we've seen on some of these issues. Um, People have a lot of opinions on these topics, but I will tell you that, people say, oh, a write-in candidate never gets elected. We have had write-in issues uh, presented by so many respondents over the years that they become a top 10 issue. Case in point, driver compensation. Enough drivers wrote compensation pay into as one of their top issues that it became a top 10 issue.
Hmm. Well, I think that's fascinating. Well, thank you for kind of breaking that down because I do think it matters in terms of helping to understand why the report is critical, given the methodology plus who's actually contributing to it. All those things provide makes it pretty meaty about what we're looking at here. So, so let's. I have so many questions. So,
Okay,
so,
sure,
so,
go away.
let's just start with the Big Daddy in terms of the diesel fuel being number one. Um, a 30% plus percent increase year over year. Uh, I mean, that's such a huge number. It's such a huge number. So,
It,
like,
it, it is, and actually, the 35+% increase we saw in fuel prices came out of our annual operational cost of trucking, and that was from 20 to 21. So that's not even really reflective of what fleets were experiencing in 22. So, I think we're going to start the data collection early on in 2023 for that annual operational cost of trucking, and I think we'll see another big jump. So you know, given what they're forecasting for fuel prices, I don't think we're going to see that drop out of the top 10 as an issue, and I think we're going to see large increases once again in our operational cost of trucking.
yeah. So, you mentioned the driver compensation as well, which was the number four, and with that, this is very interesting to me because we saw huge headlines throughout the year in terms of some of the most reputable carriers increasing driver pay anywhere from 30 to 40%, record 1 year increases on these things. And yet here we still are a number four issue. Now, I'm not saying that 1 year you can solve all the problems, but you can see how deep the problem is when you make those types of changes, and we're still not even pushing it down to the back to the bottom 10 or the bottom five issues that you as you described it. So
Well, and you're right, Spencer. And part of the issue is, I mean, drivers rank driver compensation because everybody wants more pay, but motor carriers also oftentimes select driver compensation as one of their top concerns because they're concerned about the sustainability of these pay increases. It is very difficult to walk back someone's pay. And so, as they have responded to the driver shortage by increasing driver wages, I think there's concern on the part of motor carriers. Where's the tipping point where I can no longer sustain that
yeah.
if the freight market turns soft?
No, that's interesting color because what I'm hearing you say is because it's not just I need more money, it's the executive side saying I'm concerned about being able to pay more money, um,
Absolutely.
and meeting
Absolutely.
those demands. So that is kind of collectively creating that sensitivity across the industry, and so that's super fascinating. Let's talk about number six with the detention and delay because the huge inefficiency challenge right now. So let, let, let's uh, let's define the problem for our audience a little bit, and I'd really like to get into a few of the recommendations that are in your report about what we can do about it.
So detention is a condition that's kind of unique to the trucking industry. So the way I explain it to non-trucking audiences, imagine you go to work, you show up at work on time, but you're told you can't really start doing your job from anywhere from 2 to 4 to 6 to 8 hours. So just sit there. You're likely not going to get paid while you wait, but then we'll tell you you can start your job. Well, that's what happens when drivers arrive at customer facilities all too often. They have to wait in a queue. If they're early, they're penalized. They're told they have to get in the back of the line because you didn't come right at your appointment time. Or heaven forbid you meet some traffic congestion or bad weather and you're late for your appointment, get to the back of the line. these many of these warehouses are facing the same sort of workforce issues that we are facing a driver shortage, so they don't have all the staff they need to load, unload vehicles. So it is just a very challenging situation. And particularly post COVID, when these facilities often would not let the drivers in to use the facilities out of COVID fears, but they've sort of kept that, unfortunately, firewall up. And so I'm being told I have to wait to to make my delivery or make my pickup. I'm not allowed to use the facilities. Sometimes there's a porta potty out there, but oftentimes there's not. I mean, it's just like the truck parking situation. To me, it's an untenable situation, and it is such a productivity sap for this
Right.
industry.
Yeah. And so expensive, and when there's no margin to be inefficient effectively. But
Absolutely.
so I think that's fascinating. I would really like to learn a little bit more because when I'm in the M&A environment and our team is trying to do transactions, one of the things that we don't hear as much about is the speed limiters issue that was a new addition to the report this year. Help us understand that. What's happening there, and why is that causing pain?
So, a speed limiter is essentially a way to top out the speed that your vehicle can go. And so you can govern your trucks at 65, 68 miles per hour. There is currently no regulation that says you must govern your trucks at X speed. Many fleets do it for a safety issue. Many fleets do it particularly when we see diesel prices go so high to better manage their miles per gallon and their fuel usage, because when you're driving faster, you're burning fuel faster. So there are good sides to speed limiters. Here's where the concern comes in. Speed regulation of trucks and not of cars means cars can continue to go as fast as they want. And you see this in many cases if you drive in um, heavy truck areas where you see governed trucks that can't go over 65 miles per hour. And if you get a lot of those, you can create sort of a wall of trucks. Cars get frustrated. I want to get on the interstate. I want to get off the interstate. There's this wall of trucks. They're just going 65. I got to really punch it to get past them. So, drivers in particular, and we saw this in a lot of the writing comments, are very concerned about road rage resulting from them going slower than the general traffic. And two, safety issues, cars going so fast and then running up on them, not realizing those trucks are governed at whatever speed they're governed at. And so, that and it's that speed differential issue, which there has been research around, that does create more opportunity for interaction between cars and trucks, and therefore more opportunity for crashes.
Which is obviously, and obviously that leads right into number 10 in terms of all the things that, you know, that's why people call us. I can't sleep at night because I'm worried about that outcome. And
That that
um,
big
and
that
so I
big
can,
nuclear
that
verdict.
makes a lot of sense about why the speed limiters are just exacerbating the angst about number 10, basically. And so,
Absolutely. And in the full report, Spencer, we also list the issues that rank 11 through 13. Sometimes they're emerging issues that just haven't sort of popped up yet. But in this case, number 11 was only separated from number 10, lawsuit abuse reform, by 4 points. And it's so closely related, and that's insurance cost and availability. And as you pointed out early on, it's very hard to look at any of these issues in a silo. And clearly, those two are very closely related. The insurance industry has been taking it on the chin for a number of years because of these increasing nuclear verdicts. They're having to raise premiums. Carriers can't keep up with the cost of the insurance, so they're taking on more risk themselves through higher deductibles or self
right.
insurance. So it's just a tough cycle for everybody.
No, we see that all the time where, I mean, maybe not so much in 2022, but I mean, Lord mercy, like 19 through 21 in terms of the insurance market where we're getting these 50% to 100% increases year over year. No company can absorb that type of increase. It's like
No,
game over
absolutely not.
overnight. And so I do think that there is a little bit of um, recognition that it's not the insurance companies. They don't want this any more than the truck drivers do.
Right.
But as far as understanding about how disruptive these reptile verdicts actually are, it just creates insanity for everyone. So I want to bring us back now to what was the number one issue for the last 5 years, which was the driver shortage. So what's happening there right now? Because on any given day, you could have thought leaders within our industry that will say, stop talking about a driver shortage. That's not what's happening. They might say maybe we have a utilization problem, and that's the real issue. Either way, kind of like the previous example where around driver compensation, no matter it's still a huge area of sensitivity. But whatever we're talking about. So, what's your take on it? What's actually happening right now?
Well, there's no question that we do have a lack of drivers to fill seats. We have more freight demand than we have drivers to fill that demand. Now, why don't we have the drivers we need? You can talk to many fleet executives and they'll tell you they get applicants. It's not that they're not getting applicants, they're not qualified applicants necessarily who they are willing to hire and put behind the wheel of their vehicles. We have a drug and alcohol clearinghouse now, which the industry pushed for and was successful in getting. Makes all the sense in the world. It's what we want. We don't want habitual drug users behind the wheels of our trucks, but we are now finding, particularly in states where marijuana has been decriminalized, that people will take a pre employment test, test positive, and they're out. And so, and even current drivers who might get caught up in a random test or a post crash test positive, and they're out. And large numbers of those drivers are not starting that return to duty process to get back into the workforce. So, we have an aging workforce. We've got significant percentage of our driver workforce. I think about 54% of our driver workforce right now is over the age of 45. And a very small percentage of our workforce, about just under 7%, is in that 20 to 24 age bracket. So as those older men and women begin to retire, we're not backfilling with young people. So we don't have enough drivers right now. We don't have enough qualified applicants right now. And I think we're going to face a steeper cliff if we don't get more young people interested in trucking careers, which means we got to fix detention and we got to fix parking. We got to make sure compensation is where it's supposed to be.
And I think you'll probably appreciate this. When we're in a transaction environment, in many cases, depending on the structure of the deal, there's huge considerations around the transferability of the driver pool. And so what ends up happening in diligence, just like what you've talked about, what we're looking at is the remaining available career
Right.
of that driver, and that in some ways is helping to understand what risk am I actually transferring. Because if the average age of the driver pool is 60 years old, well, that's a concern, considering that the statistics are that the driver lives about 14 years shorter than the normal human being, give or take. I'm not sure exactly what that stat is, but it's significant. And
Right.
so it's a huge deal to not only in just terms of age, but like you said, no one has any appetite to transfer drivers that can't mitigate that number 10 concern. Are you going to get me in a situation from a safety standpoint that is a game over situation for my company?
Right.
And
Absolutely.
this, no one has an appetite for that. So something's got to give. Like you said, bring in a younger workforce that wants to do it, that wants to comply with all the things that are required, or autonomous trucks, or you tell me what's the solution there.
Well, I do think there's a lot of potential if we can focus our attention on bringing young people in the right way. And I believe that the pilot program that FMCSA has started as part of the Drive Safe Act, the Safe Driver Apprenticeship Program, holds a lot of potential because it outlines safety technologies that have to be on the vehicle before we put that younger individual in the seat of it. It outlines criteria for that trainer that works with that younger person. If we can start to build out our farm team, if you will, of younger individuals through a really deliberate, safe process, yeah, I think there's a lot of potential to get young, dedicated people into this industry.
Well, I love that. I love your optimism. So let me hang out there for a minute. Where do you think we're getting it right? Like, where do you think we're growing as an industry and maturing in a way that gets you excited as we
Well,
look to the
I
future?
think safety technology deployment has been a real shining star for this industry, and the investment we've made as an industry in safety. We did some research looking at that interplay between litigation and insurance cost and availability. And as part of that, we asked fleets what safety technologies they had deployed recently. And overwhelmingly, the most frequently cited safety technologies, road-facing cameras, which the drivers really love once they understand them because they see now that there's video feed that generally exonerates them, that shows when they are involved in an incident started by someone else, so it's no longer he said, she said. There's video evidence that the truck driver was doing what they were supposed to do, and a whole host of others, collision avoidance systems and other systems that fleets are deploying, taking that proactive safety approach that's going to pay off for us as an industry.
I love that. All right, let's talk about predictions. Do one prediction, then I'll give a little wild card question. We'll wrap it up here. So predictions, we had a new number one in 22. Let's look at 23. What do you think the number one slot's going to be for the number one issue in this upcoming year?
I believe we'll still see fuel prices in the top five, given what we're seeing. Um, it's hard to tell whether driver shortage will go back on the top or whether we'll still continue to see fuel. But I think it'll be one of those two.
Oh, that's good stuff. All right, so a little wild card. We know you've been in trucking for a bit, as you shared. So let's just go back in time. Young college student, an English major, if I'm correct.
Yes.
Uh, had you not gone down this path into a trucking wormhole, where might you have gone career wise? What would have been the alternative path for you?
Well, since I was a little girl, I've always wanted to be the boss. So I
Oh,
used to start clubs so I could be the president of the club. So my high school ambition was to be the editor of the New York Times. So
oh, I love that. Well, hey, that might be the next act.
I'm getting a
We'll
little
put some.
little old for the next act, but I'm loving this act. So
Well, we're loving the work that you're doing in this space. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for spending time with us and just sharing your knowledge with our network and our friends in this industry. That's going to do it for us in the hot seat. We will see you next time.